Recording in progress.
Being held on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. We have an agenda in front of us. The corporate officer has already made note of a few additions. Do you have something else to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For 17.1, I would like to use section 91A. I would like to add that in there as well for appointments.
We'll provide the wording for that when the time comes. Perfect. So with the amendments to the agenda, do I have Warren? Thank you very much. Seconded by, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I would like to move, but an amendment that item 5.2 be moved to 15.2 under new business.
Second.
15.2?
5.2 to be moved to 15.2.
Seconded.
Director Powell seconded.
Yeah. That would be the RRC financial status update. In addition, with the new submission from Chair Claybrander, moved to item 15.2.
Oh, did that appropriate? Okay, I didn't know if that was because it was postponed for a previous meeting. If something dealt with differently.
Well, yes, thank you, Chair. It's okay to move it on the item, but still all previous items. It would still follow the postponement rule.
Yeah.
Okay. So just wanted to confirm.
It wouldn't be considered as.
Yeah, that's
Great. Okay, thanks very much. So that is now 15.2. We have a mover, we have a seconder. Is there any more discussion about the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Unopposed, motion carries. So
Now the as amended.
because moving to amend it.
Yes.
Right. So now we have an amended motion. And we have a mover for the amended motion.
sure.
Okay, Director Gisborne, Director McCormick. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, none opposed, motion carried. Any way to get that on there? I can see those two. Thank you very much. All right, adoption of the minutes of the September. Sorry, yes.
Sorry, I'm just looking here and I think we should do 3.2 before 3.1. Because it's an earlier time.
Oh, okay,
So
sure.
And I'll move 3.2.
Thank you very much. Just get myself here. Yeah, seconded by Director McCormick. Any discussion? Well, I guess, are there any errors or omissions? I should have started off with that. No hands?
thank you, Chair. This item 3.2 is just to correct just a wording that was incorrect at the meeting.
Right, so there would be no errors or omissions. We've done all that already, so.
Yeah, my understanding is there was an error, and this motion is to correct that.
Correct said error.
All around the table we missed, so.
Makes sense. All right, so all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Going back to 3.1, minutes of the regular board meeting, September 25th. Director Gisborne, seconded by Director McCormick. Thank you. Any errors or omissions? Seeing no hands, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. No delegations or inquiries. We have unfinished business. Item 5.1. How would somebody like to, would anybody like to make a motion regarding that item? Director Gisborne, we have a couple of blanks there, so.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, oh, I don't see an and between the two, so we could deal with the first part and then deal with appointments on the second, is that correct?
Corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair. So this motion has, the first one you've seen is actually a motion that has already been adopted and is just presented there for information. It's just been unactionable because we haven't been able to advise who we are appointing. So we're just requesting if the board desires to appoint someone that they provide us the names of people.
I guess the question would be then, do we have interest from board members to be a part of this committee? Director Gisborne?
I was gonna suggest that I could sit on this committee.
Okay, so that's one. We can have one or two from what I understand, but
I'd nominate Director Elliott.
do you have interest in taking part in that, or?
The subject matter absolutely interests me. It's an advocacy area that I'm very passionate about. I just worried that I'm a little bit overcommitted at the moment, and I'm not sure I'd be able to do it justice, and that would be my concern. And the other part was when we were hearing the delegation, it occurred to me that because of my active parenting of children with disabilities, that I might be in conflict a lot of the time.
Okay. If we have no other nominations, we can like to read out the motion with your name put in there, I guess.
Sure. I move that the board appoint Director Gisborne to the Community-Based Services Consultation on Local Services to Children with a Disability Committee as requested by the Powell River Educational Services Society.
And a seconder, Director Elliott. Thank you. Any other discussion? Being none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carried. So we are on to correspondence. And does anybody have any business arising from said correspondence? Seeing none, we'll move on to Chair's report. September 30th, I did report this last month, but it has happened since the last board meeting. I participated in the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, a nice flag raising event at City Hall. Representatives from Chilhama Nation, the city of Powell River, and there were a number of electoral area directors there in attendance, which was really nice to see. We walked down to Willingdon Beach, and it was very well attended, and the weather certainly worked in our favor. October 15th, I attended the quote Walk With Me at the Tla'amin Health Center. It started and ended with circle time to discuss addiction and the impacts that it's had on our community, and especially in relation to the opioid crisis. And in between the discussions, all of us took a walk around to show some while listening to pre-recorded stories from people whose lives had been impacted by addiction. The stories are broadcast on headphones that we all wore. So all the participants were hearing the same stories at the same time. It was actually quite an effective way to kind of learn about what's happening in that community and how it's affecting the people. On October 17th, I attended a regular meeting between the QRD, the Islands Trust, and the Lasqueti Islands Trust Local Trust Committee. It was a relatively short meeting. I'll let Director Fall, also in attendance, go over the items on the agenda. He's closer to the issues. On October 21st, I was at the library trustees. Library, there's just always something fun going on there. They got new mahjong sessions happening. Ivan Resipsky, a local carver, is going to be working on a carving project in the building foyer. And the writer in residence tours have been hugely popular, lots of bookings. 10 at the time of the meeting. I know 2 of those days were down at my wife's school at Kelly Creek. Poetry Slam will happen Friday, December 6th. And we did have a first glance at the budget. It seems to fall fairly in line, but there is a substantial increase in facilities, which was interesting to see. And then on October 22nd, yesterday, I had to leave another meeting to rush out for the first poppy ceremony, and I missed taking part in it by about 60 seconds. So it was unfortunate to have 2 things scheduled at the same time, but I was there in spirit. So let's go over here, Director Dowd.
Actually, you've pretty much covered everything I would have reported. The flag raising at City Hall for the National Indigenous Peoples Day, basically, and the Walk With Me ceremony out at Tla'amin, both good events. Take up any more time, we've got a long agenda.
Great, thank you. Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. 3 items to talk about. The first, I attended Tourism Powell River's annual general meeting on October the 15th. And there was a special resolution passed by the membership to amend their constitution to change their name to Cathet Tourism. society, Tourism Powell River Society would become Cathet Tourism or Tourism Cathet Society. And so that was approved. And there is a new president of Tourism Powell River, and that is Russell Brewer, who is no stranger around this table. So interesting to note. On the 16th, the Texada Airport Advisory Committee met. And as people around this table who've been around here for a bit know that there is a long waiting list for people to acquire space to build their hangars. There's quite a demand for that. And the airport is a long skinny parcel sandwiched between the Gillies Bay watershed on one side and agricultural land reserve land on the other side. So it's a bit awkward to work out where that expansion area, could be, because the area they wanted isn't going to be possible. But they passed a motion asking the board to do whatever it takes to remove the barriers to hangar expansion, which of course would bring more revenue in to the regional district from those rentals. So that I'm sure will be coming to us at some point. On the 17th, I attended the Policing and Public Safety Committee on Texada, and interesting to note, possibly alarming, there has been an increase in the crime stats looking at January to October of 23 compared to January to October of 24. The largest increase was fraud. And this does not mean that Texada has become a hotbed of crime, but there are people on the island who've been victimized by either fraud online or through telephone or through whatever. So there have been and will continue to be workshops and educating people how to prepare and defend themselves against this activity. So that's going on, and that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's interesting that Russ is getting involved with tourism now as well. Busy guy. Let's go up to the board here. Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I knew you were going to come to me right as I was writing a note. Thanks. Yeah, it's been busy. You mentioned Dave, Truth and Reconciliation. I thought it was pretty powerful to be part of that group with the citizens in Powell River, and it was great to see the flag raised at City Hall, and then walk to the beach. So I was lucky to be there for that day. Lots of communication out my way. We've talked a bit about it earlier today, and about Northside Recreation Center. We're having a meeting tomorrow, a couple of them, about the new center and what our prime contractor is going to be able to, what their vision is and what the community's vision is, and putting those things together. So thanks for staff for working on that to make that happen. And the Savory Community Plan, lots of communication on that. Clarifying kind of where we're actually at in the process. We're still early, but there's an ongoing survey, and it's important. It's good people are engaged. We want them to be part of it, so getting them the right information and directing them to our website. And just a special thanks to Ms. Rodden and our staff for doing the majority of the work on that. Regular communication from Mosaic Forest Products, doing some harvesting out our way, making sure that when people are asking questions, they're getting the actual facts of the matter from the company. So I appreciate that, and that's beginning now. And then just finally, I've been talking to folks out our way, and we have to be resilient as the weather changes and stuff. Looking out for our seniors and the people that maybe need a little extra help. Like I say, being resilient in some of our weather events. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that information session tomorrow morning, Northside Rec Center. Hopefully a lot of people show up and state their opinions on how it should be, or what the priorities are, I guess. Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. So the Ferry Committee has been meeting regularly and preparing for the public meeting that's going to be held this Saturday by Western Pacific Marine, where they're going to be coming over and holding it at the school. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of people, and we may even get someone from BC Ferries. There's been follow-up on our meeting at UBCM, so there's contacts there, and that's very good. The Skeena and Solid Waste Management Advisory Committee met and had a very good meeting. We joined in. Our waste manager was joining from Alberta, which was kind of fun. But we had a lot of discussion about the needs and the ongoing issues and the new barge. There's a new barge being used, and so trying to find or think at least about ways to be more efficient, because the new barge uses more fuel and is bigger, so it's fewer loads. And can we find a balance to keep costs down and make the most efficient use and help us get towards our goals and not increase them? Last week, on the 17th, we had this Islands Trust Regional QRD protocol meeting, annual meeting we have with Islands Trust. Usually the two local trustees and the chair of the local trust committee meeting, the CAO and the planner from the one of the planners from the Islands Trust. There's no CAO from the Islands Trust because they just announced that they hired their new CAO. So their previous one had resigned and they didn't have one. They had an interim one, and they just put an announcement. So next year we'll meet them. And the main issues that we talked about is our barge ramp. There's a funny, nothing's really moved along. We sent a letter to the Ministry of Transportation to ask them to meet with us to talk about it. And the reason it's a bit of an odd issue is because we have a service there. So we manage, and we have a license of occupation for this concrete apron that goes below the high tide line. We manage that. But above that is Ministry of Transportation road allowance. But it's also under the Islands Trust jurisdiction in terms of land use for the OCP and the land use bylaw. And some of the uses of the ramp are technically not always fully in line with the law because it's being used as a terminal. Barges come and they put things on the ground, and there's things you're not allowed to do on roads that we do regularly there on that little tiny piece of road is 100 meters long that people use because they assume it's the ramp, but really it's just a road jurisdictionally. So there's an issue there, and we're just working through options that ideally aren't costing us anything. Data sharing is always a topic. So when Islands Trust has data, they share it with us, and if we have data, we share it with them. And they were asking, our coastal flood and adaptation data, the floodplain mapping, shoreline floodplain mapping. So they are interested in that, and they'll use that. And we also talked about First Nations relations and contacts, in particular, making sure we're aligned on who we're contacting with different First Nations, so that we're not, the two local governments aren't contacting different people. Other than that, right, this Monday was the Islands Trust Local Trust Committee meeting. They are still moving forward with the OCP. So, our OCP is a slow process. I think it started 6 years ago. So it's ongoing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And thanks for giving us a more fulsome report on the Islands Trust QRD meeting that we attended the other day. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. You've already covered a number of things, such as the reconciliation walk. Couple of things, for example, that was touched on by Director Lennox, the Mosaic public engagement session. Big thanks to Director Lennox. He invited me out. He wasn't able to attend. It was actually surprising to hear a private managed forest company actually engaging with the community. And of course, the community is having their voices heard. And I was thinking, oh man, it would be nice if they actually did some of this in Area B sometimes, because sometimes it's like, well, when are they cutting? Well, it looks like they're cutting right now. The main concern, though, that I think we should all keep an eye on is with increased runoff when you have these forestry activities, will Ministry of Transportation's culverts be able to handle the increased runoff? Because I do recall there was a situation south of town where there was a large flood event and there ended up being a great deal of standing water, and that caused some bank instability that became kind of a catalyst for some of our drainage studies. This was many years ago before my time. So that was October 2nd. Some of you may have heard that on October 8th, my alternate, Ted Bellier, got into an unauthorized contact with a bear. He's okay. The Conservation Office has done their investigation. And for anyone that was aware of this, it's a very low risk to the public, and the conservation officers are on the situation and are monitoring it very closely. For upcoming events, it's very sad to share this information. Barb McCullough, who did Barb's plant sales out on the highway for many years, she was a caregiver at the local hospital in the Olive Deveau. She passed away suddenly in August, and there's a celebration of life on October the 26th at 1 p.m. And she was always wonderful. I enjoyed taking my father out there when he was in his wheelchair so that he could buy more plants for our gardens. And Barb was always such a sweetheart. So that was very sad news to find out. And throughout the month, I had a few phone calls from residents concerning, regional district zoning bylaws and OCPs and housing and the usual thing, which will get me talking for about 45 minutes until they say I gotta go. So that's kind of what took up some of my other time during the month, and I'm sure there's a number of other things that I am missing, but that's all I got for now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. That's always good to hear when the private forest companies are engaging, it's informing people of what's happening. Could always happen more. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Like others, I attended the Walk With Me, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation walk and ceremony. Also attended the Western Forest Products Stillwater Community Action Team, and if you would like, I could report out on some
Please
highlights
do.
from that.
I was not able to make it. I was out of town.
So I don't want to, that I reported out at council, but I'll also report out here. The October operational information map is published and available. They're now quarterly instead of monthly, so that's good. There's a new FOM coming out in November. So what a FOM is the forest operations map for consulting with the public. And so they put it out on their website, and when they post it, everybody's got a month to study it and provide input through the website in order to get public input on their forest operations. And so they're not there all the time. They only go out when they're looking for input. So they have a new FOM coming out in November. So if folks are interested in providing input, they should go look at the FOM and provide input. They adjusted their target for their AAC down again to 440 cubic meters for this year. It had started at 470, been adjusted to 450 and is now at 440. Their current volume is at 305, 732. They expect to meet the 440. The main reason they've had to continually adjust it down is the lack of expected permitting to allow them to do their logging. There was an announcement from Western Forest Products that they're reducing or curtailing lumber production by about 10%, which is 30 million board feet from October through December at all of their mills, and affects about 800 jobs. All of the forest volume, or the trees that normally go to those mills from our operations here, are going to continue to go there. So it didn't affect that part of it. The forest resource plan that Cohaman has been developing over the last couple of years has been completed and approved by the Cohaman Nation. And there are various different zones within that plan. It's a landscape level plan, and there's zones that have different priorities for what they're managing for. And they have a conservation network throughout it, which has a combination of protected areas and cedar retentions and for managing for wildlife. Each management zone has its own set of indicators that they're keeping track of, and they're wanting all forest folks to participate in. And they have zones such as cultural, and they have other ones called ecosystem health. They have an investment zone, a stewardship zone, a cedar stewardship zone, watershed health, an elk management area, and there's this one that I found interesting. It's called a community interface areas. So those are areas surrounding where most of the people live. So most of our residential areas and where people live is what they're calling the community interface areas. And so they have indicators that try to measure how much interaction with communities and responsiveness to the communities that forest companies are having. And I don't know that like some of them have already been tracking that, but I think that's a really great thing for all of us. And they include all of the communities where people live in their community interface zones. They weren't just targeted on their own. So I really liked that about that plan. So there's a huge list of different things they're going to ask people to keep track of in those areas. Some of the zones require joint decision making. Some Some just require, you know, approval for doing something other than what the connectivity map is suggesting. So if you want to go outside of what the corridors for transport or roads or what have you, you want to do something different, then you're going to need to get approval. You want to stick to the plan that we already have written down there, then you don't need approval, that kind of a thing. So it's a pretty comprehensive plan, and it's going to really improve security of getting permits in relation to working with Common Nation throughout their entire territory. And so that's the positive, and we're really happy that that's finished. And there were some gentlemen there to talk about the certification company that's ramping up and taking the place of the old one, the PEFC Canada, whatever they're called. So, I mean, stay tuned for more on that. And they're taking the place of the CSA people. That's my report on that.
Awesome, thanks for that. It'll be interesting to see just how much of that plan is implemented, because they really could make some changes, you know, largely for the positive, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on to the consent agenda. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to say items 10.4, 10.5, and 10.6. I would suggest that we strike out and that the recommendation be.
That's where we are right now. Okay, great. We all understand. So, would anything, Maddie likes that they remove from the consent agenda?
This may sound crazy coming from me, but that's not surprising. I'd like to pull 10.6, the cash of the Resource Recovery Center. When we get to that item, I'll clarify why.
Okay, so that is the agenda to 11.1, correct? Anything else? See no other hands up, so who would like to move the consent agenda?
So moved.
Director Gisborne, followed by Director Paul. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. No, we're on 11.1, former 10.6.
Yeah, I'll move the motion, but I also have an amendment. Oh yeah, I can move it with the amendment. I think that our corporate officer might have a copy of it. Paul might scratch it on the bottom. I think our CAO has a copy as well. Here.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, are you gonna read it out for us?
Yes. It's the motion that's on the agenda, that the board directs staff to implement accepting cash transactions at the Resource Recovery Center, and that the recommendation be forwarded, well, already here,
That one.
and implement in 8 weeks or sooner, barring any supply chain issues.
Do we have a seconder for this motion? Director Lennox. Okay, you would like to speak to it?
Yeah, this motion went passed through our committee of the whole. I'm all in support of it. Myself, I would love if we could take cash tomorrow at the Resource Recovery Center, but we did hear from our staff that it's going to take some time for them to, you know, source the materials and get the training and things like that. So our CIO provided this as a possible amendment so that we could clarify to the public that it's not going to happen tomorrow to accept cash. I would like to very much lean on the part of the motion that says or sooner, so that as soon as it's able to, we can start accepting cash. But this way, you know, the motion hopefully passes, and then, you know, tomorrow we don't have the public showing up and saying, why aren't you accepting my cash? Because as we know, government moves slowly, and we would like things to move quicker, but it's only as fast as it can go. Hence the reason for this motion as amended, but I'd like to hear what the rest of the assembly says.
Great, thank you. Director Dow.
Did you say May?
Oh, like for May, the month of May?
I didn't catch that. I'm not sure I caught.
Oh, my apologies. I was most likely, I said a lot of things and not very clearly.
I'm just sending it to Shelley, but it's that the board directs staff to implement accepting cash at the Resource Recovery Center, and that this be implemented in 8 weeks or sooner, barring any supply chain issues.
It's now up on the board.
Okay, thanks.
Not in May.
I'm not gonna say what else I was gonna say, but
Yeah, it's essentially to provide clarification to the public, which I'm sure there are a number of people watching, that a lot of us around the table would like our organization to be accepting cash like essentially tomorrow, but hearing from our staff this morning, they're not ready to accept cash right away. But this would say, 8 weeks or less, cash will be accepted if this motion passes. Is that my understanding?
What I understand. I saw Director Fall had his hand up. I don't know if he's.
Yes, yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. I have a couple questions. I mean, the additional clause does two things. One, it notifies the public that we're not going to be doing this tomorrow, that it's going to take some time to put in, which is I think a good thing because expectations are important. But it also sets a bit of pressure for staff. So, I mean, I don't want to add pressure onto staff trying to get the RRC up and running, and there's lots of other things, and maybe cash might be a priority for us, but if we're for some people, but maybe getting some other services up and running is a priority for other people. So I think we got to be a little careful there. And if soon as you put priorities like that, there's going to be costs in terms of efficiencies and getting things done. So I guess I have a question through the chair for Mr. Cohenhoven if he's on the call. Is this feasible for you?
Or CAO?
Through the chair, I'll answer that. I don't think this will put additional pressure on our waste management staff. If you recall, Mr. Cohenhoven suggested that it would be 6 to 8 weeks to get up and running. He said on the outside. So that's why I've asked for this myself, so that we have a target, as well as to, again, just to explain to the public that it's not going to happen tomorrow. We will continue to do what we've been doing, which has been to accept cash somehow, some way, but the actual exchange of cash will be done within the 8-week period.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
that's great. Thank you. And I'll just note that this puts it in, it'll be in place just before Christmas, if at the latest. So thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question on the
Motion.
motion that's been provided by Director Gibb. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Okay, we are down to resolutions. Considerations for participation in the Foundry Cathet Anchor Table. How do we to deal with this one? Anybody would like to move the recommendation, or?
Sure.
Sure, Director McCormick, thank you. Seconded by? I'll second it. Anybody have any comments? Gisborne?
Yeah, I gave it some thought. I'm going to read out the motion to clarify why I'm thinking the way I am. That the board directs staff to draft a policy which will contain criteria for outside agencies to understand under what conditions board members will accept outside appointments to better serve the public. I think it's up to the board to decide who we appoint to what. Directing staff to create this policy will create work on our staff to draft the policy. Once the policy is in place, if we get a request, then it'll be up to the staff to evaluate the proposals based on the policy. I think that puts work on our staff right now, and it puts work on our staff in the future. And really, I think that there's nothing wrong with a member of the public or an organization from the public coming in as a delegation or sending us a letter straight to the board saying, hey, we want you to sit on our organization. And it might be us, it might be another board in the future, but it's up to the board to decide what are their interests and what is their availability. And what we dealt with earlier today was there was interest from 2 directors, but there was a time issue concern, and we ended up deciding appointing 1 director. And I think that should remain with the board. So I'm actually opposed to this resolution of drafting a policy for something which I think it should stay in the realm of the board and the board's considerations for all future considerations. I think this is putting work on our staff, and I think it's up to the board every time we get a request.
Okay, thank you. Director McCormick, did you have your hand up?
No.
No, not good. Director Elliott. Director Lennox, I think I saw it.
Thank you, Chair. So I do also have concerns about the flexibility of a policy to reflect the changing needs of the board and where their priorities may be at any given time. I think we could make a policy and then at the end of the day, ignore it because the board's gonna do what the board gonna do. So I'm not entirely sure it's a great policy to put our resources into, because it's just about whether the board will put somebody on a committee or not put someone on a committee. People are still gonna ask us. We're still gonna look at whether we're gonna do it or not do it based on whatever we think at that point in time. The policy might help us look at what the advice from staff is, but we're gonna ask them for advice anyway. So I'm with Mark Director Gisborne on this one. I think that it's not probably the best use of our time for this particular policy.
Okay, and thank you. Director Lennox, did I see your hand up?
Yes, you did. Thanks, Chair. I just want to echo the same comments I've heard. I'm not prepared to support this recommendation. I think we need to maintain our independency. We've seen in this meeting today that we've had a request and we've fulfilled it to our capacity. And we saw it earlier today in our committee of the whole, again, with another request to be part of a committee. And I think we're going to continue to see these. We need to maintain our flexibility. I echo the fact that we're going to want details about parameters and what it means to us and our staff. But I think, I don't think we need a policy and need to do that work. Thanks.
Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I hear the comments made by directors, but I just want to clarify one thing. If this passed, it's not to have staff just come up with criteria out of the blue. They will be ours. I mean, there'll be a proposal. Staff can't set the policy. The board sets the policy. So it would be the board's criteria. Staff just helps get the ball going and puts down what they think is a start point. We revise it. So at the end, the policy, if we went this way, we would have a policy that reflects the board's policy. And all it would really do, and it wouldn't be staff making recommendations so much of whether we should have someone on a committee or not on a committee. It would be staff evaluating and saying whether or not the request fits the policy criteria set by the board. So really it would just be, here's a request and it meets the criteria or it does not meet the criteria. And then as Director Elliott said, the board can and often does just say, oh, well, the policy that helped, but you know what, we're going to go against the policy one way or the other and appoint or not appoint. So I think it could be useful, but I also hear what the board's saying. Maybe I can understand that maybe some don't feel it's necessary, but I do think it would be useful. I just wanted to point out that it would be a board. It's not about staff. It's about the board having a set of criteria. That's the board's criteria for board decisions.
Thank you very much. So seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? We got 6 opposed. Director Fall, you voted in favor of it, did you?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so everybody else opposed. It does not pass. No reports, bylaws, new business. That the board endorsed the proclamation request from Powell River Public Library regarding Library Month, October 2024. Want to proceed on this one? Director McCormick, thank you. Moved it and seconded by Director Fall. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor? Opposed, none opposed, motion carries. Why don't know, when is that? Is it just printed and sent out or?
It's fair. Typically, you could read it out if you desired, but typically what happens is that it is added to our proclamation page on our website.
Okay.
And notice goes out that way.
Okay. I mean, if everybody's fine with that, we'll just stick with the regular. And now we are moving on to 2.2, which is the former. 5.2. Record out.
I'd like to move that this previous item 5.2 be postponed until after the submission by Director Brander included at the end of this report.
Okay, second.
Seconder, I'll talk about it.
Sure, seconded by Director Gisborne.
Would that technically be a motion to table for the corporate officer? Sorry, I'm just curious.
Thank you through the chair. Was the intention to table it until you you vote on this, or was it to move it to another meeting?
Motion is to not deal with this motion until after we've dealt with the submission by Director Brander. I've read both the submissions. If we pass Director Brander's submission, then there'll be no point in talking about 5.2 because the issue will already have been dealt with. If Director Brander's motion fails, then we will talk about the one from the last meeting. So doing that at this meeting was my intention.
Oh, okay, great. So a motion to table 4.67 of the procedure bylaw, motion to table can be made when some other matter of immediate urgency must be considered prior to the motion being considered. So I think what we're hearing is that it's better to consider the new submission first. So it would be in order to table the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to table it and we have, you're seconding?
I'll second that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
And then is there any other discussion concerning the motion to table this? To vote on that, right? I mean, all in favor? Okay, none opposed, motion carries. So now we are up to my motion. So I'm just going to read the whole thing out here. It's a bit lengthy, but it encompasses everything that we need to know about it. Whereas 2.5 million is required to complete the final stage of the Resource Recovery Center project, and whereas the Solid Waste Management Service is contributed to equally by taxpayers throughout the entire region based on property values, and whereas the Catholic Regional District seeks to reduce the borrowing costs for the Resource Recovery Center equitably for all taxpayers, which are property owners within the city of Powell River who contribute taxes directly to the Catholic Regional District, and property owners in electoral areas who contribute taxes directly to the Catholic Regional District. And whereas the Community Works Fund funding is allocated from the province to the city of Powell River based on a formula using a funding floor and the population of the city of Powell River. And whereas the Community Works funding is allocated from the province to the Catholic Regional District based on a formula using a funding floor and the population of the electoral areas. Now, therefore be it resolved that the Catholic Regional District Board contact the Council of the City of Powell River with a proposal to jointly and equitably fund the $2.5 million required for the completion of the final stage of construction of the Resource Recovery Center, utilizing Community Works grant funding, with contributions based on the formula for each area's proportionate share of the equitable funding established through the Solid Waste Management Service allocation as follows. City of Powell River to provide $1,298,535. The Catholic Regional District to provide $1,201,465 for electoral areas A, B, C, D, and E. Director Dowd, second. Thank you very much. I'm just gonna make a few comments, very short, because basically everything that I would like to say is in the motion itself. But I think this really makes sense because the amount of money, the amount of community works funding that the electoral areas or the regional district receives is based on the electoral areas. The amount that the city receives is based on the city. This service is used by the entire populace of the region, and we would all be contributing an equitable amount of community works funding towards it. The big bonus is this money we have in reserves right now, from what I understand, and this would mean we could pay off the final stages of the RRC without increasing taxation. Now, one of the other options that had been placed in front of the board earlier on was to fund the entire $2.5 million. If we were to do that over a period of 30 years at an estimated 5% interest rate, it would work out to just under $3.8 million in interest. So this would be a great way to save money. It would be a great way to pay for this now instead of putting it on the burdens of the generations that follow us. So I'm really in favor of doing this. Director Dowds.
Yeah, and I want to, Director Brander's encapsulated it all pretty well. We've got a $2.5 million cost overrun. How are we going to pay for it? The original suggestion was we pay for it totally out of taxes, which would be distributed among residents of the city and all of the electoral areas that participate in the service. Nobody likes tax increases. Everybody would like to see them kept to a minimum. The motion I proposed last week or last meeting would have reduced the borrowing and reduced the amount of taxation, would have taken some money from this regional district's community resources fund or community working fund. And that's obviously not a happy thing for the regional area representatives. And that was a sticking point, and we were having trouble getting together. This one, I think, is an even better solution because it reduces the tax burden on everybody that's part of the service in the regional district, be they in an electoral area or within the city. It pays off the debt actually faster. It doesn't extend and increase our taxation. So, you know, the debt for the Waste Resource Recovery Center is going to be paid off quicker, and that'll result in a return to the taxpayers. So what this would require is the city saying yes and agreeing to this. But I think the end would be beneficial for the taxpayers of the whole regional district, and I'm in favor of it. I want to thank Director Brander for working together and trying to find a solution that can possibly deal with it, because if we were back to the original proposed resolution, I could see some conflict arising.
Thank you very much. So Director Fall first and then Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions and then a comment. So first I'll get to my questions. And I want to thank Chair Brander for giving careful thought for this, because, you know, there's a lot of, you know, of course, this has caused some concerns around the table. So the question first, which is related to timing and process. And so through the chair to our corporate officer, I suppose, or our CEO, if this motion was to pass here at the board, it, you know, the motion says, you know, for the QRD contact the city of Powell River with a proposal. So that would be a letter or a communication to the city of Powell River. There's no timing associated with that. So would we have a time frame? So first of all, two-part question. One is, what would be the time frame, or should we have a time frame for getting back to us, or we just sit and wait? When it comes, it comes. And the second is, when it does come back, would that then go to finance committee, or what would be the process for the response? Would the response be a finance committee issue, and then we'd be dealing with it with finance again?
See, I know you first.
Through the chair. I think the staff could probably have that letter out before the week is out. And the conversation with my cohort over there, try to advance it on the earliest agenda that they could at the city level. Response time, I think everybody understands the necessity of it, and I would respect everybody's commitment to that. And as far as, what was the second question having to do with?
So when it does, so when a response comes back positive or negative from the city, where would it go? Would it go to finance committee?
Since it's originating here, I think it'd come back right to the regional board, because you'll be getting your answer definitely as to what you wanted to do.
Okay, thank you. So now I have a couple comments. So I think this motion could be digestible. I think it needs a bit of discussion, but I think moving it, you know, asking the city, you know, we've done that before. We sent a letter and it wasn't positive, but we can ask them. You know, I have, in some ways, of course, I have some concern. I shouldn't say of course. I have some concerns about using Community Works Fund in that scale for the RRC because of what it means for the other projects in rural areas. That said, we receive regularly these reports in our financial planning from our as where all the money goes. And in the past, when we've talked about Community Works Fund, Area C has received a lower amount of benefit than everywhere else, all the other areas. And so given that this is coming from the representative from Area C, I can view it as, you know, a proposal from that area director to use that funding in this context. And so in that sense, I think there can be some support from me there. So I have no problem moving this forward. The motion that was on our, that, you know, that it is replacing, I can't support at all. But this one, you know, seems something we can move forward, and then we can get an answer and we can discuss it when we get the answer back.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elliott.
Thank you. Chair. So I think there's no harm in asking. We've asked before. The problem with the ask is that the community works funds in the city budget have all been allocated. So they would have to claw them back from somewhere else and replace that with borrowing over at the city. And so when you look at city taxpayers, they're better off to pay borrowing for a project where they're roughly 50-something% in charge, responsible for paying back than they are to borrow money to pay 100% of the 1,200 or 1.298 million. So if, for example, we are using that money to pay for an item that we would then have to borrow money to pay for, the borrowing is more expensive and we're 100% responsible for that at the city versus 50-something% here. So city taxpayers pay a higher price for that decision than everybody else. And so it's unlikely to be favored by that council. Just so this is a delay tactic because basically you're asking the city to decide to increase city taxpayers' taxes more than they would have to with a decision over here. So I think it's just a delay. It's not going to come through in favor. And I know that it's an opportunity cost thing. So if we spend our community works funds over at the city on projects that we are 100% responsible for, you're getting a better break on our taxes over there than we would over here.
I'm not sure it really works out that way, but because a dollar is a dollar is a dollar, and borrowing 1.2 million or 1.3 million for this versus 1.3 million for something else is still borrowing 1.3 million.
It is, but the 1.3 million that we would borrow here, the city has help in paying it back. And the 1.3 million over there, they do not have help paying it back. So it's more expensive for the taxpayer. We have to raise our taxes more over there than we would here to pay for that same 1.3 million. Because it's distributed over more people and more taxpayers here at the regional district. So that becomes the conundrum, is it isn't in the best interest of city taxpayers.
I'm not sure I entirely agree with you on that one, but we're gonna move on to the next speaker right
Just
now.
math.
Dr. Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not entirely sure on Director Elliott's points in relation to the finances. And that's where I have a bit of a challenge, making a decision on this because there's a lot of numbers and there's a lot of factors to, consider here. For example, there is a discrepancy when we look at what is equitable. If the equitability is compared based on taxation, then the number that is before us kind of reflects that taxation split. However, if you want to take equitability based on how much community works funds we get for the electoral areas versus how much community works funds the municipality gets for the municipal population, in 2024, the city received $698,290, while the regional district for the electoral areas got $406,000, 373. You combine those two figures together, and that gives the electoral areas roughly 37% of the overall amount, and the municipality gets roughly 63% of the overall amount. To put that $2.5 million of borrowing into perspective with those ratios would actually put the number of the electoral area contribution to $919,676, which is substantially lower than what is in this motion, which would mean that the electoral areas would be overpaying what would somewhat be considered equitable, roughly $210,000. And that must be $281,000, I think I made a mistake there. I'd also like to remind the Assembly that the electoral areas already have contributed $600,000 of community works funds towards this project already. And as to date, the municipality has not contributed any community works funds towards this project. So that's where like there's a lot of numbers, a lot of figures. I am supportive of working out an equitable cost sharing agreement with the municipality. But I need to know the numbers a bit better. And I think that's where sometimes these discussions, I would also like to apologize to my municipal counterparts. When we had our finance committee, I think we might have rushed this item through a bit too quickly. And now here we are at the board trying to hammer this thing out, trying to find a solution when maybe, we should have given it some more thought and some consideration to all parties at the finance committee. So I'm still curious to hear what the other directors have to say, but part of me wants to pass a motion to say, hey, we want to meet with the city about this, and then also consider what these figures mean in the electoral area context, because it's a really big picture when you look at community works funds. And the reason I say that is when you have a region-wide service, it taxes all properties throughout the entire region, including the very profitable run-of-the-river projects up in Area A, which is why Director Lennox is so wealthy. But when it comes to the things that we spend this on, such as the Northside Fire Department or the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department or our water systems, we don't get any taxation from those large industrial applications, and it's very heavily shouldered by those small area service areas. So that's something that we really need to consider as the electoral areas under our siloed services, where it may reduce the taxation in one field, but when we don't have that money for those small service areas, such as Myrtle Pond or Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department, that can have a major impact. And then my third point is when I look through the history of what we spent community works funds on, there was roughly $800,000 spent for the Paget Road bike path, which is a very odd thing because it's a regional service, but by allocating those funds to the regional park service, we were able to get active transportation in the rural areas using community works funds, and the board of the day supported it because it did not impact any taxation within the municipality. If that funding isn't available, then in the future, we may be wanting to do active transportation corridors in the rural areas. And the only way to do it would be to raise taxes across the entire region. So if we end up with a decision where we don't have those community works funds and we want to do some active transportation corridors, that might result in future resolutions coming before the board where the entire region has to cough up some money to pay for, an active transportation corridor on Texada or south of town or north of town. And I think that's going to be a bit of a challenge. And I like the intent of this, but I have a lot of question marks in my head because community works funds is something that we have spent a lot of time talking about, and how that impacts our electoral areas. And I'm not entirely sold one way or the other. I get the intent and I appreciate that, but I think we might have some big challenges when it comes to, buying a new fire truck or fixing up a water main, and we don't have those funds available and we can't get the funding from the industries. I don't believe, Lafarge on Texada, they're not into some things and some things they do, but Myrtle Pond doesn't get a lot. The only thing they get is from the residents that live there.
Okay, Director McCormick, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I think this really needs to go back to the Finance Committee because I believe we need a more thorough discussion than we're able to have at this table. But my comment really is in response to Director Elliott's comment. You were concerned that by taking your already allocated community works fund and putting them into this, that you would then have to raise money and tax your residents. But you need to understand that by the rural areas continuing to use our community works fund toward this project, we then have to tax our residents. For example, the upcoming work that's going to be needed on our community hall, we could be looking at $1 million worth of repairs. Who's going to pay for that if our community works fund is all gone? It's going to be the residents. And it's really difficult for 1,100 people to come up with that kind of money. However, that would be then our responsibility. So understand that it's a kind of a two-way street that, by not, participating in supplying your share of community works funding, that really forces our rural residents to increase taxation for the projects that desperately need doing. So I just wanted to clarify that and say that I really would like to see this go back to Finance Committee for further consideration.
Okay, thanks very much. I was wondering, one second, Director, I'll get to you in a moment. I was wondering if our head of financial resources, Ms. Greenan, would be willing to, or comfortable, I guess, speaking about the concept of community works funds going towards this project versus another city, exclusively city project, or I don't know if you have any comments to be made on that or not. I hate to put you on the hot seat there.
Okay, thank you, Chair, through the chair. I think Director McCormick summed it up quite well. It's, you know, when we're looking at this project, it's a regional project. And if we're purely community works funding, then it's that each of the funding entities pays a proportionate share. Whereas if we say only put the electoral area funds into it, then yes, when we borrow, the borrowing for the city is diluted. But as Director McCormick says, then when we do have a project in one of the electoral areas, then we don't have those community works funds. And so now it's the exact same dilemma, but on the electoral area side.
Okay, so is that addressing the whole concern that borrowing would go 100% to a city exclusive?
She addressed it by calling it diluted.
Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, yes, it would, it's the same concept, but just like Director Elliott was saying, is that if they borrow all of their money for for a city project, they pay 100% of that debt. Well, the same with the electoral areas. If we don't have community works and we borrow 100% of our debt, then it's 100% on the electoral area debt. So it's the same thing, just two sides of the.
But I guess my question is, if you're borrowing 1.3 million to pay the city proportion of the RRC versus 1.3 million to fund separate city project, I mean, you're still borrowing 1.3 million.
The chair, yes, it's just that the 1.3 million borrowing it for the RRC, the whole region pays.
Yeah, okay. What I was indicating more along the lines is if we borrow the entire 2.5, then 1.3 of that is going to be borrowed by the city, and 1.2 of it will be borrowed by the.
No.
Well, no, not really, but paid back by the residents.
Yes, like if we borrow the 2.5, yes, the whole region would
Pays it back.
pay the borrowing back.
Yeah. So anyways, let's go ahead to Director.
So, you know, we literally could be here for weeks trying to determine what's equitable. Equitable is a great term because you have to take in all the variables that come in, who might need a bike lane, who might want a bridge or a community hall, or, you know, trying to figure that out ahead of time is a little bit complicated. Okay. The original proposal by staff was pretty simple. Everybody's going to pay more taxes. Area B, Area C, everybody that's involved in the project is going to pay more taxes. City residents do. My original motion was an effort to reduce the impact on taxation. That had a reaction. Okay? Director Brander's compromise motion was to not rely on taxation at all, but to approach the city about the use of community works funds. And we can do that rather than try to guess. You know, and I can't guess. Councillor Elliott might be able to. Councillor Southcott might be able to, but I can't guess what the city is going to say. And it would take us a long time to probably come to a consensus on what we guess the city is going to say. A simpler way would be to ask the city and have the city have that discussion saying, would we like to see this tax increase? Or would we like to see the money come from somewhere else? Community Works Fund would be a good place to do it if it's there. And you can talk forever about what to use the Community Works funds for. Can you put that into a project, or you could borrow money for the other project that you're doing and use the Community Works Fund for that. But I'm in favor of giving this a try, communicating to the city that we'd like to do it. We could send it back to the finance committee, which is going to be, you know, if we come to the same conclusion at the finance committee after another long discussion, we could be starting the same process with the city at the end of November, the end of October now. Why don't we try it and see what happens? And let the city and the city councilors decide whether they want to participate or not. Because at the end of the day, the solution is we have money to pay for the Resource Recovery Center completion, which is costing another $2.5 million more than we thought it was going to. And we don't see an increase in taxes.
Thank you, Director Dowd. Make a quick comment here and then I'll open it up for anything else. I agree with you. I think we've been looking at three different options. One, to borrow the entire 2.5 million. One, to take 1.4 million out of the QRD Community Works funds. And then the one in front of us to take 1.2 out of the QRD and 1.3 out of the city. Of those three options, I greatly favor the one we have right now because the money is there and because it would be no more taxation or no additional taxation for the residents of the city and the electoral areas equitably. Director Gisborne, and anybody else who hasn't spoken yet? I guess, okay, Director Lennox, okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and I appreciate the comments around the room. I mean, really looking at this proposal before us, I wish that this had come before us originally. I think that part of it is we are trying to backtrack to get to a solution, so I appreciate that. But I think it's a proposal. So we have the numbers are in the proposal, but there's nothing else. So, you know, I'd like to take some action on this to see what the answer may be. But then that proposal has to be defined for us as directors. So
Thank you. And Director Gisborne, do you have anything new to add to the discussion?
Yeah. There's kind of like a two-part discussion here. And when I read the motion, the first part says, therefore be it resolved that the Cathett Regional District Board contact the Council of the City of Powell River with a proposal to jointly and equitably fund the 2.5 million required for the completion of the final stage of construction of the Resource Recovery Center, utilizing Community Works grant funding. That half of the motion, I'm all in favor of. I've said that for years. I'm all in favor of the Regional District Board and the City Council of Powell River having a discussion about what we're doing with our grant fundings for things that are shared projects. The issue I have, which is a sticking point, is the second half, which is the contributions based on the formula. And those amounts are something that we haven't really dug into. And I think if we send this over to the city with the following formula, and then we have a discussion at our finance committee and we change the formula, the city councilors, I expect, are going to be quite irritated with us because now it's like we're not negotiating in good faith. So if we were to strike out the second half of this motion, I'd be all in favor of the first one. But the second half, I do have a real issue with those numbers because, you know, just to put it into perspective, because Director Doubts, you know, we can get into equitability all we want, but if the city provides 1.3 million and the electoral areas provide 1.2, how many years will it take for those community works funds to be topped up again? Well, the city gets roughly 700,000, so it'll be less than 2 years. The electoral areas only get 400,000, so that'll be at least 3 years. So with those variables, I think that that's not equitable. So I don't know, do I move an amendment or do I move to split the motion? Because I'm all in favor of the first part, is to say, let's discuss this with City Council, because Director Doubt and Director Elliott are not here on behalf of council. They're on behalf of their constituents within the city, so they can't speak on behalf of the municipal council. So I would be all in favor of us sitting down and having a dialogue with one another because like they're our neighbors. But to put forward these dollar values before we've really had a chance to digest them over at the finance committee, I think is a bit premature. And you know, to spend the money like this to say, well, it's not going to have an increase on an impact on taxation. I would argue it absolutely will, because Director McCormick just pointed out we've got some big expensive items coming down the pipe, and that is going to have an impact on taxation if we don't have this money in the bank. It's like, oh, well, you don't have to borrow money because you got all this money in the bank, but then when the money in the bank's gone, well, now you got to borrow. So how do we do that? Do we split the motion? Because I'm all in favor of talking to the city, but I'm not in favor of putting these numbers forward at this time until we've had a discussion at finance.
And I think the CEO has a comment.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to ask Ms. Greenan, what formula represented by the numbers indicated in this motion, 1.3 million and the 1.2 million? Maybe an explanation as to how those numbers are arrived at can put everything into perspective and context.
Thank you. Through the chair. So the formula is based on the assessment values. So this formula ensures that the dollars that are provided by the city and the dollars that are provided by the electoral areas, they're based on assessment. So that means that the savings for each area, the savings that we're not borrowing, same tax rate to each residential property within the service area. Whereas if we had a different formula, the savings might be lower in the electoral areas than it would be. And this way it's the same.
I think it's proper for us to go using that formula. We can't be looking at the formula that UBCM uses for Community Works Funds dispersal. From what I understand, the breakdown is how the service is paid for. So that made the most sense to me when we're dividing up whom should pay for this last $2.5 million. It should be done just by how the service is paid for. Director Fall, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we could, go around and talk about all kinds of ways of equity, but I think the formula does have equity at some objective level in terms of the service. So in other words, two ways to look at it. If we did all the borrowing, if we did $2.5 million of borrowing, that would increase taxes by X dollars, or the tax rate by so many dollars per 100,000 assessed value. This formula more or less will allow that to not happen equitably across. So there's not going to be any winners and losers. In other words, that's kind of a balance based on the service and based on who's paying for the service. So in other words, if we borrow, if you kind of divide it up who's actually really paying for it, if we did it all with borrowing, then the city would be effectively paying over time for that 1.3 million, and the EAs would be effectively paying for the 1.2. So I think that's a reasonable way to do it. We got to be a bit careful with the kind of negotiation, because it's difficult between local governments to go back and forth. And much as it would be nice to sit down and hammer this out, QRD to city, that is sort of challenging. So I think I'm prepared to send this out for two reasons. One is I don't believe it's a delay tactic, as Director Elliott said. We do not know what the city is going to say. So the city may or may not choose to balance this, but we are asking the city for this. And I think one thing I really find positive around the discussion around the table today is that we're recognizing that the Community Works Fund comes in based on the population, per capita population of the electoral areas, and that it is a fair thing for projects that are regional projects that are covered, that are paid for and participated in by the city, that there's a balance on Community Works Fund. There is a opportunity cost. If we were to do this, there would still be an opportunity cost, as Director McCormick pointed out, that we wouldn't have that Community Works Fund for something else. So we would be saving equitably or equally across the EAs. But to kind of add my perspective on that same point about what happens between using it, well, it may be in the city, the city finances, if they chose to use Community Works Fund for the RRC instead of a city project, that would have a 50% impact. If we did the same thing on Lasqueti and we said we're going to pay for broadband connectivity or fire hall, if we were to spend that instead of Community Works Fund versus borrowing, that would mean we would get 100% of the benefit on Lasqueti if we were using Community Works Fund, but we would only get 3% of the benefit if we were using it for the RRC. So the math is even more, the same issue happens equally everywhere. it's just more extreme in the electoral areas. So I think that argument makes even more of an argument to say use of the community works fund should primarily be for electoral areas because that's where they're allocated from. But I'm prepared to move forward on this because we don't want to cause more delays. We want to make decisions. We're not making a decision today other than, if this passes, other than asking the city. And if they say yes, then we can talk about it. And if they say no, then we have to find an alternative solution. As a couple directors have mentioned, maybe there's needs to be discussion at the finance committee, and I'm not averse to that. It's just whether we do that before or after. I think if we go now, I don't know what we would talk about. We don't have as much concrete. The reason I was asking my questions earlier, if we get this back at the board, I believe unless we're really confident that we can finalize this, an appropriate action would be to get a reply back from the city, yet positive or negative. And if we're not sure, we want to have more discussion, then we can refer to finance at that time and have debate there or discussion there and flesh it out. Because we don't know. If the city says no, well, then we got to, go back to the drawing table and figure something out.
Okay, thanks very much. Director Elliott, any comments?
So the original ask we made of the city, was it a different amount? And was it calculated differently? Maybe that
It was not another
we did ask.
separate thing, but is it point of order or is
I
it?
don't have an answer for Councillor Elliott.
Okay, well, through the chair to Councillor Elliott.
The original motion was simply to tax everybody. So that didn't happen. And if I can finish my answer, the last time that the regional district asked the city to make a contribution to beyond taxes of city funds for the Resource Recovery Center, there was no allocation of exactly how many dollars the regional district would put in and the city would put in. And that was a topic of discussion at the city because there was no concrete direction from the regional district as how many dollars the regional district would put in. So, all I'm saying is that this is a reasonable thing to ask. You can ask the city if the city likes this, and the council will debate it and make their decision on what they think is the best financial thing to do and get back. But I think it's a positive way and a collaborative way to get through a difficult decision that we're trying to do here.
Okay, thank you very much.
The difference between that ask and this.
So I think we've got around this, and did you have something more to say?
Yeah, I asked a question. Gotten an answer.
What question was that one?
We split this
Oh,
because I'm in favor of the first half, but the second half I think we should discuss at the finance committee.
I mean, the whole thing kind of blends together. Yes, CAO?
Yeah, through the chair. I'm not certain. Well, it could probably be split. But then you're not sending anything to the city to think about as far as a number. And if you want to go back to finance, correct me if I'm wrong, corporate officer, but that becomes a weighted vote, correct?
Motion to refer to finance?
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm just trying to look at splitting the question in our procedure bylaw first. So I'm not, where would you suggest the split would occur?
Where the comma is.
Okay.
So the first half would be that we reach out to the city to talk about equitable funding of the Resource Recovery Center and using community works funds.
CAO?
Through the chair. Are you suggesting a different approach, thus changing the intent of the motion?
It was the intent of the motion to reach out to the city to say that we want to partner and work together. Is that the intention of the motion? Community Works funds for the Resource Recovery Center.
Through the chair, if I may,
Go ahead.
I don't believe it is a reach out to the city board to council. It's a letter.
It's a letter with very specific numbers.
Yeah.
So arrived at.
So what I'm getting at is if you're suggesting to change that intention, then I have to lean on the corporate officer to see if it's be split, because it's a letter that is going to the city council, not a change of how it's going to be done. And then that would require a subsequent motion.
Because the resolution is that the regional district contact the council of the city of Powell River with a proposal to jointly and equitably fund the $2.5 million required. It doesn't say anything about a letter, a form, or going in person. It just says that we contact them. And my thoughts is with that motion is that that contact would be, hey, what's your thoughts? Would you like to work with us on this? That would be the first step. Second step, I think, would be what amounts work with all parties.
That is not what my intention was when I came up with this motion. It was to approach the city, not just with a handout saying, hey, do you want to work together on this? It was very specific about the numbers and how we arrived at said numbers. Director Dowd.
Be the discussion going back and forth. And I just want to weigh in. But I don't think it's wise if the corporate officer comes to the conclusion that this could be split. I don't think it's wise to do it. As I've said before, in my impression, the fact that we reached out to the city the last time with a similar offer, it didn't include any numbers, and that was a matter for discussion at the city. I don't know whose vote that changed or whose vote it might have influenced. I know it was part of the discussion. When I look at this, it is an invitation to participate. It's a clear delineation of how much the regional district would pay, how much the city is being asked for. It gives a basis for discussion. Maybe the Powell River City Council will like the idea and get back and say yes, or maybe they'll say no. But I think it's reasonable to take it the way it is. One resolution, either it'll pass or fail here. Go to the city and see what happens and get it moving down the road.
I would agree. I would choose to not split anything. Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question, I think, of finance staff. Ms. Green, you said that the 1.2 and 1.3 were arrived at based on property assessment. Is that correct? I'm just curious because Community Works Fund is allocated per capita, is it not, based on population? So why would it be a different fund or different formula? Like, why would you use assessment rather than population to calculate what the split should be?
That's how we do taxes.
Thank you, Chair. The Chair, we used assessment because that makes it equitable for each taxpayer. So the savings then are the same for each taxpayer. If we use population, you might have a savings, a higher savings to people within one area compared to another area. So, if you lived in area D, you might pay one tax rate per 100,000. You might save a certain tax rate per $100,000. But then you would, but in the city, they would have a different savings per $100,000. This way it makes the savings equal for every.
Okay, thank you. I hear you. I'm not really convinced though, but thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Just thinking that if.
One moment, please.
So in reading the motion altogether, it does sound like this, reading the whereas clauses, that this part is part of the motion. Like it is not a distinct, separate part, because whereas the solid waste management services contributed to equally by taxpayers throughout the region based on property values is above. So if it was submitted with the intention to fund it that way, and if I'm not mistaken, that's how it would be as well. Like this is the division that would be used for borrowing. Not entirely certain. So I don't know that it would be that it could be considered individually, only because the intention was to it was introduced in a way that that's how it would be. So you might want to propose a different motion if you wanted to fund it in a different way.
Well, this is the motion we have in front of us, and based on your expert opinion, it should not be split. So
Point of order, could we see the motion, please? Can you post it?
It is on page 29 of 105 of the agenda.
I don't have that.
here, it's up on the screen.
Oh, it's not, but I can, it might be too small.
Well, that's not, yeah, that's not this one. The numbers are the same.
You can read.
Can't read that fast.
Just 1 second.
Therefore be it resolved.
I think we've gone around this quite a bit.
I'm gonna share my screen.
Everybody's happy with it. I'm inclined to call the vote.
I was gonna propose an amendment. For the numbers that are on the motion. City of Powell River, which currently says 1,298,535. The amended. I'll bring these numbers to the corporate officer. And then those can go up on the screen.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm not sharing right now. Sorry. I can put these numbers up, but there might be more different parts of the
It's amending 2 numbers in the motion.
Okay, so right now we have the electoral areas. The amendment is that the electoral areas would give up $919,676, and the city of Powell River be $1,580,325.
Yes.
And
And the seconder.
are you seconding that? Okay, well
one-
then keep your hand.
1 second. I just want to get clarity first, because we have a motion on the table that says specifically with contributions based on the formula of each area's proportionate share of the equitable funding established through the. So if we've changed those numbers, we might have to amend more than that. It's
Right.
just what I'm.
I was trying to do actually a point of order around.
Chair,
Point of order.
Point of order.
you've got people talking all around the table
I understand.
about different things all at the same time.
Point of order.
So if we could have, there you go.
There you go.
What Director Gisborne, sorry, is suggesting is to change the nature of the motion. And what should happen is, if that's what people want to do, they should defeat the motion and put out a new motion, because those numbers do not match the formula within the motion. So all of the changes so far proposed change the motion and what is intended. And so I wouldn't be in favor of any of them, but I also think procedurally, if you don't want to do what we have in the motion, you should defeat the motion and put forward a new motion. I don't think we're like trying to change the intent of the motion through amendments is appropriate.
Director Gisborne.
Thank you, sir.
Last thing, or?
Oh, no, we have
Anything new?
an amendment on the floor now.
No, we don't. We have a point of order.
I moved an amendment.
Yep.
It was seconded.
I
I did second it, yeah.
Wasn't recognized.
Oh, I didn't recognize that.
Well, I made a point
In
of order.
that case, Director Elliott speaking against the amendment is the automatic seconder under
It
Robert's.
was a point of order around
She's
procedure.
on the point of order.
Okay.
So right now I had not recognized the seconder. Are you still wishing to second it? Well, right, okay, thank you. The point of order, you stated it correctly. It is going to be changing the intention of the motion. So therefore, I don't want to accept the proposed amendment of just change.
Challenge the ruling of the chair.
Okay. So we have this situation where Director Gisborne has.
Chair, point of order. I've challenged the ruling of the chair.
Okay. So then I guess, that's right, all I do is call the vote. So who is in agreement with the chair? Raise your hand And anybody to the decision making? Chair's decision.
In that case, I move that this motion be forwarded to the Finance Committee.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I have asked other electoral area directors. Point of order. That's not true. Unless you give me a legal opinion, I don't believe.
Director
No,
Gisborne,
you said-
Director Gisborne, you have to stop. A point of order was called by you.
Since when is a referral a weighted
Director
vote?
Gisborne, let's just calm down. The chair is speaking right now, okay? I have the floor. All right?
Then tell me, is a motion to refer a weighted vote? Yes or no? And since
I am
when-
asking you to use a pleasant tone of voice with me. Take it all down 20%, okay?
Yeah.
Sit back, relax. Let's all be friends here again. Okay? Now I'm gonna ask the corporate officer. In this sort of situation, will you weighted vote? Do you have that information?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So staff reached out and sought advice, and subsidiary motions follow the vote outlined in that the main motion passed. So it's not necessarily always a weighted vote, but if the motion that's currently on the table is a weighted vote, then any subsidiary motion that we find in 4.65 of our procedure bylaw would follow the same way.
Okay, so that means we have a motion to refer on the floor, which has been moved and seconded, correct?
In that case, I move tabling of the motion.
We have a motion on the floor that has been made.
Yes, I'm moving tabling of the motion. Because there's another more urgent issue that's just come up.
We haven't, okay, I'm getting lost here now. So you're moving tabling of the motion, so now we need to have a seconder to table the motion.
Asking what the major motion is for table.
The emergent issue?
Yes, that's a good question. What's the urgent issue?
Well, now the rules of how we conduct our meetings appears to be changing and consistent with the information I've gotten from my UBCM representative, and I want a legal opinion on it. I think the other directors have a right to know what's going on with the rules around this table. Because I asked, and this was the response I got. Here's what I find out. A procedural motion such as a motion to postpone, refer, table, etc., is subject to a corporate unweighted majority vote, irrespective of the voting entitlement of the main motion. If that's not true, and what I'm hearing is something different, then I want a legal opinion to back it up. And I therefore move that we table this item before us until we get an answer on whether a motion to postpone, refer, table, etc. is a weighted vote or not.
Corporate officer.
Thank you, Chair. You could move in camera under section 91.
Chair,
1 second, I'm getting a response from the corporate officer. We could move.
Try to help.
You're, okay,
Under section 91, I and N.
okay, Director Dowd,
I was gonna suggest,
please.
that since there are many questions that the chair has for the corporate officer and the CAO, and they seem to be important questions that deserve thought, I'm gonna suggest we take a 10-minute break. We've been sitting here for a long time dealing with a tense issue, and we come back, have a calm answer to the question of what the voting would be of a motion to table or to do anything else, and then we can maybe get back to talking about the issue. I think having a break to have a chance for the chair to confer with the corporate officer would be a good idea.
Sounds like a great idea. Let's call it a 10-minute recess. Call it a bio break, get a glass of water, whatever you need.
Can I ask a question about one?
Are we in recess yet?
If we're in recess, can you just ask the individual?
Okay.
Yeah, we're in recess.
Recording in progress.
Okay, welcome back. Right now we have a motion to table. And I'm going to second that motion. If that motion passes, then I will make a motion to go in camera. So, any discussion on the tabling? I see Director Elliott's hand is up.
Yes. So one of the reasons Director Gisborne wants to table it is for legal opinion. I'm just wondering how long it would take, because it's actually not very far away. It's in early November, right?
It will not take long.
Okay, so that was my question of staff. If we were gonna table it, would we have the legal opinion we need prior to the next meeting?
Bring it out.
I didn't hear your precise answer.
Oh,
Okay,
It'll
you're
be-
making a motion to table. And
Yeah.
you're saying, I want to clarify all the things you said, because you said more than one thing. Okay, you're gonna make a motion to table, and then we're gonna go into a closed meeting.
yes.
Don't know what we're gonna talk about in the closed meeting. When are we gonna lift it from the table? And we also have another motion that's been tabled and is waiting for a decision on this one. So what are the timeframes you're talking about, Chair?
I say. Go ahead, Corporate Officer.
Thank you. I think the chair has stated that he has seconded this motion. Consider the motion to table, and then he's proposing a motion to go in camera. Under section I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that privilege. Once that's completed, our procedure bylaw indicates that a motion that has been tabled must be considered. So there's no procedure once the immediate item of business has been disposed with, then the other item is brought back forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, great. So, McCormick.
I'm a little bit confused because there's nothing on our open meeting agenda left except question period. So why would we not just refer this item to the in-camera meeting that's going to follow this meeting and conclude this so that.
I think this is just a better way to go to deal with it now. We'll be going into in camera later on as well after the question period. This will be
in camera, then come back and do question period, then we'll go in camera again?
And come back and deal with the tabled items that Director Dowd has accurately pointed out, and then we would deal with question period.
Okay, so are we all in favor of tabling it? Okay, none opposed, great, it's tabled. I'm now making a motion that we that the board move in camera, the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Second by Director Gisborne. Any discussion? None, all in favor? Great, going in camera.
Recording in progress.
One moment, from my recollection, we've had a. Where were we left at? Split, which was denied, and then.
A motion to amend,
Where's a motion to
denied.
a second but not called?
Yeah. And then there was a challenge on the chair's decision, which was what was upheld. So we're back to the main motion on the table.
Great. I think we've gone around this one 6 ways from Sunday, so. I mean, I'm ready to go, but if somebody feels they still have a comment on it that hasn't been made, new information. Do I see a hand up, or?
Is the motion to
I
postpone?
just wanted clarity on the motion that's on the,
This is
The table.
back to the main
Back to the
motion that
main
I
motion.
introduced way back when.
Point of order. I believe that the motion to split was overturned due to procedure and we upheld the chair's decision. And then there was a motion to postpone, which was seconded or made by Director Gisborne, seconded by Director McCormick. We received advice that we should be waited on that one. but we
Sorry.
never called the question, and then another tabling motion went forward. We went in camera. Now we're back out. I think we're back to the motion to postpone. And it's a weighted vote.
Close.
I thought it was a referral.
Yeah, it was a motion to refer to finance.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay, sorry.
Okay, so we're sitting here, we have a motion to refer,
Okay,
but I don't believe we have a seconder right now, is that correct?
I don't have that.
We don't have it, we don't have a seconder, we don't have a second recorded, so this is a motion to refer.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, Director McClellan. Any discussion then? And let's try to keep it brief. We've been on this for a long time. We still got an in-camera session to go, so. Okay, so we got Directors Gisborne, Doubt, Elliott, Wall. Correct. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chair. The reason why I'm requesting that this item be referred back to the Finance Committee, and I have now been informed that it is a weighted vote, so thank you to our staff for clarifying, is these figures, I do have some issues on whether they're equitable. They may be equitable for taxation, but I don't think that they're necessarily equitable for the funding that we received, which is based on population. If this motion is referred back to finance, I don't want it to just be a delaying tactic. I would be happy to put forward a motion that we reach out to discuss these issues with the City Council of Powell River while the Finance Committee hammers down on what those numbers can actually look like. I think these are great starting point conversations to have, but I don't want to put forward a number that, you know, when the city council comes back, if the electoral area directors aren't willing to accept, then I think that would put us into a, you know, discussion in bad faith. So I would be very happy to have this motion go to the Finance Committee where we can really dig into how the Community Works Funds impacts our siloed services, because a big challenge we have is that taxation in the municipality is all one big service area, but when we get to the electoral areas, the only kind of comparable is, I guess, the social planning service, which affects all electoral areas. Pretty much all of our other services are subsets of the electoral areas, so it becomes a very complicated formula. And I think out of respect for the electoral area directors, we want to really dig into those figures. But I want to sit down and work with the City Council of Powell River about how we do funding for a lot of our shared services. I know the recreation complex is something that comes up, and this is going to be a much bigger discussion. So I would be very happy to put forward a motion if we postpone this one, where the electoral area directors can meet with the City Council of Powell River to discuss a lot of these issues. And you know, just to kind of throw it in there, we have a recreation complex funding service, but the agreement expired last year and we still haven't had a chance to sit down. And I think that's an opportunity where we can sit down and start talking about the funding discrepancies between our two sides. And that's why I'm in favor of referring this matter to the Finance Committee where we can crunch those numbers and at the same time pass a resolution to reach out to the City Council of Powell River to say, hey, how can we work together to start getting our taxation down mutually across the entire region? Thank you, Chair.
Director Doubt, I remind people it's getting late.
I'm totally aware of what time it is. And I'm opposed to the motion to refer. I think it's to refer it back to the Finance Committee, I think is the main motion. I think we can send this, we can approve this, send it to the city. The city will reply. Will either reply yes. We can have a discussion at the board or the finance committee, however we receive the answer from the city, and make a determination, talk about all of those things Councillor Gisborne or Director Gisborne wants to talk about, and we can move this forward. If we simply refer it to the finance committee, we're putting it off for another month. That'll go another month and another month, and who knows what we'll be doing by the time we get to when it's tax decision system time. So I'm in favor of dealing with this now. I think we've spent a lot of time on it, and I think moving forward, putting forth a proposal gives us an opportunity to hear back and talk about all kinds of dynamic ways to solve the problem.
Great, thank you. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't disagree that we need to talk to one another a bit more around how we work together and bring in broader issues. I don't think we have time to tie it to this particular decision. Like, that's a big conversation and it might take a year. And so I don't think we have the luxury to tie that conversation to this decision. Having said that, it sounds to me like some folks may not be comfortable with the numbers in this particular motion, and that is what the issue is. I want to say that this particular use of tying to property assessments and equalizing the impacts for all taxpayers makes really good sense to me. And it seems to me that we're going to be asking the city to participate in a way that is very structured and that's easy for them to assess. If we come with a question that is less easy to assess or treat our taxpayers less than fairly, then our chances of getting a yes answer is lower. So I like this proposal is significantly different than the one that went before council before. And the reason it's different is because it's based on how we would be taxed versus population or some other way of deciding things. And so my question, I guess, to the area directors is, would you be more in favor of doing these numbers or doing 100, like all the borrowing, or coming back to the question the way it was? Because this one is a good one to ask the city. And the reason is the way it's split and the numbers that are there. So if we want to carve that back or change it in any way, I'm not in favor of it anymore. So I'm in favor of the main motion the way it is. I don't mind talking about it in finance, but there is some timing issues around budget too. If we don't actually get it before the city, before they manage to get far into their budget cycle, you know, it gets harder. So the longer we wait, the harder it gets to get a yes out of the city.
Okay, thank you. Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I just have two brief points to make. One is that we've asked the city before for in a more general way, and this motion on the table is to ask the city in a specific way about this specific issue. I would like to hear from them. It doesn't make a commitment on our part to move forward with this. We're proposing something, but we have not voted on that proposal. We have not said we will do that. But it does, you know, in terms of the numbers, they're there, you know, 2.5 million and then 1.298 million and so on. But really what they reflect is this formula. And the formula is 51.9% to the city of Powell River, 48.1% by the electoral areas. That's the ratio that we're more or less proposing. That's the fundamental question, because the city of Powell River might come back. They don't have just a binary choice. They don't just have to come back and say no or yes. They could very well come back and say, okay, some of it, half of it or something, the rest could be borrowing, in which case that proportionality is built into the main part of the motion. So I'd like to hear from them, and it doesn't commit us. So first of all, there's a sliding scale, and whatever it came back with, if it was some positive number, doesn't mean we have to accept it directly. We can go from there. So I think that would be a useful thing forward, but it also does not commit us. Like, we're not deciding today that this is exactly what we're doing. We're asking the city for their thoughts on this proposal, and we get it back, and then we can deal with it then. And as I said earlier, I think if and when we get information back from the city, then it may very well, and will, in my view, will be likely best to send it to finance and have a healthy debate on what that means and how do we finalize this.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Want to wrap it up for us, Director McCormick?
Thank you. I have actually a fairly quick question. Does this recommendation commit the regional district to spending the 1.2 should the city come forward and say, we will agree to the 1.3? Are we making that commitment? Because if we're not, I'm just wondering if that sets a false expectation. That's why I kind of wanted to go back to Finance Committee, because I think these numbers need to be, fleshed out and discussed a bit more. So that is my question. Does this motion commit us to spending this money?
Let's take that. Chris,
Through the chair, I think it really depends on what kind of an answer you get back from council. If they agree to what you proposed, then it falls upon you as to how you want to possibly fund your half. But I think bargaining, so to speak, in good faith would say that you would stand behind it. Because what's your alternative? Borrow that amount. And then your taxpayers are paying and are on the hook. And the city's taxpayers are getting the gravy train.
Okay, so what you're saying then is it does commit us to spending that allocation if the city agrees.
I'm saying you're not committed. What I said was, if you don't, you're not really bargaining in good faith. You've given them a proposal and said that we will match it. If all of a sudden you're changing the game, that's not good faith. But it's up to you to whether or not you're going to commit to it. So it's still in your hands.
Okay. Great. Director Gisborne.
Yes, hearing that from our CIO, that's what causes me a great deal of concern is I want the figures that we're going to be offering the city to be something that we can stand behind at future meetings and subsequent meetings. But I'm not sold that these numbers are actually fair and equitable, because for all the dollars that come into our region, 63% goes to the municipality and 37% comes to the electoral areas. But what's being proposed is that we will offer up 48% of this total bill. And that's something that I'm hearing around the table from the electoral area directors, and out of respect for them, I think that the electoral area directors need to sit down and figure out what they believe to be equitable and compare the community works funding with all the electoral area challenges. And I think the appropriate place for that is at the Finance Committee. And I don't think that should limit the board from being able to reach out and talk to the city. And some might think, okay, well, that means we're going to delay. But I would be happy to talk to the city ASAP, because we have, what is it, $300,000 sitting in the bank for the recreation complex funding agreement, but we have no agreement. And I would presume, I would expect the city probably wants some of that money. And I think that it's a long time coming that we sit down and have a conversation. But I think out of respect for the electoral area directors, we need to figure out what's fair and equitable for the electoral area directors. And I don't like the idea of committing this kind of funding, which, yes, you are correct. If the city comes back and says, we love your proposal, this all sounds great, but then the electoral area directors have had a chance to sit down and discuss it, and we go, you know what, this actually isn't fair and equitable from our perspective. And now we're changing the offer, and I don't think that's fair to the city either. I think that might be very harmful to our negotiations, and I can understand that if we put this offer out and the city spends the time, which of course they're having long meetings as is, to come to a conclusion and say, yes, we'll accept the agreement, and then the electoral area directors say, hey, it's far more complicated on our end. And I don't expect the municipal council over at the city of Powell River to understand the intricacies of the electoral areas and how they're funded on the siloing of services, because it takes electoral area directors a long time to figure that out. And that's why I think we should forward this item to the Finance Committee to hammer out those numbers and pass a motion to ask the city, can you meet with us? And about the Resource Recovery Center, but I'd also say, can we also talk about the Recreation Complex funding agreement? Because we got this money in the bank and we want to give it to you, but we need that agreement. I think we should be in favor of referring this to the Finance Committee.
Okay, so we have seen no other hands. We're gonna call it Director Lennox.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, but
No, go ahead, sorry. You haven't had a chance to speak, so.
yeah, thanks. I'll keep it brief. You know, I think what you're hearing is the electoral area directors have everybody has an appetite for this discussion with the city for sure, 100%. But we're pretty much, the concept for us is it's per capita funded, and we want it per capita kind of fund the effort. And so that's the general, as far as we're prepared to go now without further discussion. So I'd prefer not to bargain in bad faith, because we're literally having an open discussion here saying, like, this is what we're prepared in our minds right now. So I think that although I don't want to delay the process, I want to be true to my word and get the offer correct. So that's where I'm standing. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Before we go and have the vote, you had a comment,
I just
CEO?
want to comment, Chair. This is a very sensitive issue to everybody's heart, obviously. We've heard about funding formulas for grants that come down from the province. That's been an age-old story for years. Take the last one that came down regarding services, where our friends to the south got really robbed short because they were doing all of the recreation, et cetera, but didn't get enough funding to even cover it. And their municipal members, you know, were winners. So it's provincial funding. That formula is the purview of the province, and therefore the city shouldn't be held at bay or be blamed for that. I also should remind you that, yes, the 5 EAs are talking about this, but we're also talking about this in relation to a regional service. And so there will still be 2 other votes involved in that regional service decision, whether it's done at finance or at the RD board.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's it.
Okay, so the vote is to refer this to the Finance Committee. So everyone in favor?
Question, when's the next Finance Committee?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So are you voting in favor of the?
No, clarification. My apologies, but I want to make sure we're using accurate information. I agree with many of the points of the CAO. However, Community Works funding is not provided by the province. It's provided by the federal government through the UBCM to local governments. It's not a provincial funding source.
Okay, so the vote is for.
Doesn't one, 6 of the other.
Motion to refer. All in favor of referring it to the Finance Committee? We have 5, which will pass.
Just 1 second.
3,
4, 5, 6, 7.
Yep.
And then
7, 6.
And then opposed? Refer to the Finance Committee.
And I would like to put forward a motion, and hopefully the corporate officer can help me with the wording.
sorry, we haven't.
We don't like having motions being done on the fly, like it's against our procedure bylaw.
Thank you. So our procedure bylaw, we still have another motion on the table.
You do.
No. So, on the advice of the corporate officer, we tabled this one until after Director Brander's motion. So now we've referred Director Brander's motion to the Finance Committee. And so I'm going to move that I don't know, I'm guessing, I'm going to move that we table this until the Finance Committee reports on Director Brander's motion.
I would second that for whichever procedure I see.
I'm hoping that means that it'll come to the meeting, the same meeting as the Finance Committee's decision comes to. And if I have to refer it instead of tabling it or postpone it instead of either one, that'll work.
whatever the proper
Thank you,
procedure
Chair.
is.
It sounds like we're postponing to a certain time.
Refer to finance, right? Would that be, oh, sorry.
Let's just let the corporate officer tell
So
us.
I understand that you're wanting to deal with the motion you want to discuss it after the motion has been discussed at the finance.
After it's brought back to the board from the finance committee.
That is postponed to a certain time. So. Got that.
And I believe we have a seconder for that already. Is there any discussion on the postponement? Director Elliott?
I'm in favor of postponing and allowing the conversation at the finance committee and for us to come back. And I know that it would have been faster and more expedient to just go ask the city right away. I do think that our board would benefit from the conversation at finance because there's lots of things I'd like to bring up that I think are more appropriate at the finance committee than trying to tack it in at this point. And I'm happy we're going back to finance committee. There are no weighted votes at finance committee, and sometimes that makes the city feel a bit railroaded, and the respect that the area representatives are asking for of the city should be returned. And comfort level at the finance committee should be sought, especially when you know you're coming back to a weighted vote, because that isn't happening right now.
Okay.
And so I want people to remember I voted to get us more comfortable, and I'd appreciate the same at the finance committee.
Director Newborn.
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone around the table, including the municipal directors. I think at the finance committee, we need to really hammer this out with full respect for all parties. And that day, later on in the afternoon, we have a board meeting. And if we need to be quick, that's 2 weeks. We can do that. So a big thank you to everyone that's gone around the table. A big thank you to Director Doubt for bringing this issue to a bit of a head. One of the things that an older individual told me, he said, well, under pressure is how you make diamonds. So it seems like we've had quite a bit of pressure today, and I think we are actually working towards some good decision making, as challenging as it will be. But this is an issue that I'm sure is going to come up again in the future, maybe not with the Resource Recovery Center, but other shared services, because we are kind of like one big island, and we're all here together. So a big thank you to everyone who worked on this, and I appreciate Director Doubt's motion that this motion goes to the next meeting. It's kind of like the caboose of the other motion that got referred to finance, where it says, hey, it's not gone. It's following the other issue that we are going to make sure that we deal with. And when we get to that finance committee, discuss the previously referred motion, I want all electoral area directors and municipalities, municipal representatives that don't represent the municipality, represent the voters of the municipality, to crunch the numbers and dig into it. And I hope that we work together and come up with a good way forward. And a big thank you for everyone at the table for being patient with me. It's been a long day.
Yeah. And it has been a very long day. And I think part of it, I'm listening to the debate. And I think part of it is a necessity to understand that although all of the electoral area directors are elected in a specific area and it represents specific taxpayers, like Director Fall directs all of the taxpayers to the regional district on Lasqueti Island. Councillor Elliott and I sit here as equal members to the other 5 members of the board, and we represent taxpayers as well. 13,000 taxpayers who actually pay taxes to the regional district. And if you look at the balance of assessment, probably a little bit more taxes overall than all of the electoral area taxes put together. And I think the taxpayers in the city deserve the respect of the electoral area representatives in being real taxpayers who really do benefit and pay for a service of the regional district. And that's what we're talking about, a regional service, not some kind of special event for a small number of people. And I think we need to think about that a little more as we get together here.
Okay. So I guess we're doing the vote then. To table it. Yeah, to postpone, sorry. Okay, so no hands up, all in favor? Any opposed? No opposed, motion carries. I think we're at question period. Yes, we are. Any questions?
Hello, Chair Brander. This is Galinsky from the Peak here. I am wondering if you or a staff member could email to me the motion that you introduced with regard to the issue just passed.
I'm sure we can. Yes, we will do that.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. No more.
It's on page 29 of the agenda. My corporate officer is just saying, so you probably have it. If you don't, let me know or let a staff member know. We'll get it to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Chair.
So we've got an in-camera session. I'd like to read that for me.
I would love to.
Hold on 1 second here.
In addition.
I have sent Director Gisborne the section. I can share it on the screen that needs to be added.
I'm trying to, oh, hold on. I'm not used to this kind of email. Oh, here we go. Okay. I know, number A is in here. Okay, so I got the right agenda. Okay, good. I move that the board move in camera and that the meeting to be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the regional district or another position appointed by the regional district. C, labor relations or other employee relations. D, the security of the property of the regional district. I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. L, discussions with regional district officers and employees respecting regional district objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual regional district report, and N, the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under a provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Seconded by Director McCormick. All in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
the gymnastics system.
I was gonna move that we table item 9.2 until we get advice.
You know, then we'd have to forward it to somebody and then we'd have to see if we could get the Parliamentary Action Committee involved. Refer it to the Lakeside Coast Regional District.
Thanks.
Oh.
Recording in progress.
Okay, the board would like to rise and report on the following. The board appointed the following volunteers to the Savory Island Community Plan Advisory Committee: Ann Troyer, Brian Miles, Denise Smith, Emily Skullbrew, Eric Sears, Pharrell Ekman, Janine Reamer, Johan Zerby, Justin Woodward, Lisa Jackson, Kidsada, Sarah Vibunchai Cool, I apologize, Liz Webster, Marie Gabrielle Bechard, Nancy Zahner, and Travis Hepner. And once we go into a recess at this point, right? Procedurally?
The open meeting, okay.